I've set this up, this distiller, and I've found the hot spot there. So you can see that it's full of water and that it is shining on that steel wool. Also, you can see, I don't know if you can see close up here, but I can see a little moisture forming on the side of this glass. And I also see a little drip right there in the bottom that wasn't there. So I'm just going to keep this going now. You can see right there, if it's close enough, you can sort of see that moisture right there. Now it's important this is a sponge here. You don't want to squeeze it. You don't want to suck it. So you want to resist those temptations. Even if you're completely parched and your lips are blistered, don't squeeze it, don't suck it. It just could have dire consequences. You could contaminate the sponge. Don't poke it, don't touch it. It's just meant to stay right there. All it is a baffle. So it catches that moisture and it concentrates it mostly in here where it can collect in the bottom. Okay? Yeah, I'm seeing some very minor bubbling going on there. Very minor. See that there's some moisture going through this tube. I can see it collected right there. I can see a little bit of condensation in there, but not near enough. There's maybe a drop of water in there. A couple of drops of water so far. So at this point, you know, your lips would be blistered and you'd be parched for water, and that would mean you would be very tempted to take that sponge out and squeeze the sponge, and that would be catastrophic. I still have the option here to get a magnifying glass and add a little extra heat. Starting to see some bubbling, but this is the hokiest setup that I could think of. The cheapest and hokiest setup is not always the best. Upgrading this mirror would change the result. Using a magnifying glass would change the result. So we would get a little bit more heat in here. Get this thing kicking more moisture in. Just I could see some condensation happening in there. Not very good. You know, not very good at all. And if this had worked, it would be good for in the mountains to sterilize water for cooking. You can't get tubes that handle steam. But I believe there's rubber hoses that go up to 600 degrees. Okay, so this is very slow. You see, it's not boiling yet, but it sure is hot. It is getting, the water's hot. And you can see bubbles on the side, but it's not boiling at all. And it's giving off very little steam, or it's not really happening. So now if you with the Peltier and the better lens and the pressure cooker or pressure pot, and you get a much better result. The Peltier, you're gonna have to power it, and you have to do that with a solar power or a battery. I would say solar power with a rheostat, so you can control how much goes into that Peltier and what percent that it's running at. So a lower percentage, I think that Peltier is going to run for a lot longer of a period of time. And of course, if you looked at the other Peltier devices, they have a heat sink on one side and a cold sink on the other. So, and it's where that heat buildup is where I'm concerned that's destroying the Peltier. And so keeping that heat low is pretty important. So you either have to bleed it off, or you want to bleed as much off of it as you can, and then you also want to have a rheostat. So you have a big heat sink with a fan and a rheostat, and I think you've got it made there. And also a fairly large cool sink here with several veins that are poking down in here so that it condensates on those veins. It doesn't even have to be very cold to get 100% of the steam that's coming out of your pressure cooker. Okay, so it needs to be right on that spot where the lumens are highest, the brightest spot, the focal point of the dish. That's where it needs to be. If it doesn't do that, this one here is not really good enough. It's been sitting here for a while and it hasn't done much at all. So not very good at this point. So the better dish, the shinier dish, and probably there's one out there that's a little bit better shape, and with the mirrored finish, and then you'd want to go ahead and use, you could just use a pressure cooker. Okay, my comments on the solar distillation experiment. The collection canister with the sponge doesn't work that well in my opinion, because you need some cold elements in there, and the air needs to free flow through it, and there needs to be some cold elements to capture the moisture. Really what's needed is a Peltier canister, one that's got the cold on the inside, that it's designed to capture that moisture. And also you want it to have a rheostat, and you want to be able to blow off all of the heat that's coming off on the other side, and then you can capture the 100% of the moisture that's coming from the cooker. The jar with the stainless steel wool did not boil. which indicated that the solar mirror wasn't enough to upgrade the dish. The steel wool in the jar is the cooker. It would probably work, but again, it's really small, and I think it, in order to upgrade it, you have to use a pressure cooker. And then also the next part was the tube is not particularly high heat, so I believe you can get a rubber tube that goes up to 600 degrees. I want the Peltier canister to be powered by a solar charger that runs from a solar cell and a battery. A solar cooker on a boat also needs an automatic leveler.